Gary Bauer, President of American Values, welcome back to the Values Voter Summit.
Great to be with you, Tony.
You know, a lot of focus, obviously, this week on the United States Supreme Court and the vacancy, but the controversy surrounding the Supreme Court has nothing to do with Donald Trump, does it?
No, it really doesn't, Tony. I mean, you remember the history, and I do, but I think a lot of people forget. You can go back to the latter part of the Reagan administration. It was 1987, and he nominated a guy that was probably the most distinguished jurist in the United States, Robert Bork. And everybody thought, this is a home run. I mean, this guy is an intellectual giant. He'll probably be on the court for decades. He'll have a great deal of influence and so forth. The left went absolutely berserk. It didn't matter what a nice guy Ronald Reagan was and how he got along with everybody, which we're always hearing, It didn't matter because they've used the courts for decades to get public policy that they could never get a legislature or the Congress to vote for. So they went after Bork with such vicious tactics that a whole new word was brought into the lexicon called to bork somebody, which means to throw so many lies at them, they can't possibly get the truth to keep up. Tony, one of the things that's been completely forgotten, Judge Bork at that point was not a deeply religious man. I think he actually described himself at times as an agnostic. So the Southern Democrat senators who intended to vote against him, when their very conservative constituents would call them and say, why are you opposing Ronald Reagan's nominee? These Southern Democrat senators would say, well, I can't vote for an atheist on the Supreme Court. And then those good conservative voters in the South said, oh, well, I wouldn't want you to vote for an atheist either. So Robert Bork was really laid low by that whole endeavor and spent a good bit of his life trying to rebuild his reputation. A few years after that, we had a nomination of Clarence Thomas. And I had the pleasure of organizing a citizens committee for Clarence Thomas. Everybody, I think, well, a lot of people weren't alive. So Clarence Thomas looked like he was going to make it through, and then at the last minute, there was this charge of sexual harassment or a Me Too moment or whatever. And it almost worked. It was only because Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas, had the courage to stand up and fight back against that. And the public identified with this African-American man, this black man, who said, this is a high-tech lynching. And he thankfully made it onto the court. Tony, one more example, so we had the borking of Bork, we had the horror story of Clarence Thomas. Bill Clinton is president, and he nominates somebody for the Supreme Court named Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was an attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union. Now, everybody knew she was going to be a strong left-wing justice. The vote in the United States Senate for her was 96-3. Because, quite frankly, the Republicans hadn't caught on yet that the Bork situation, the Thomas situation, was all about the ideological struggle to control the court, which is still playing out today.
But in response to that, going back to Judge Bork and Thomas, the Republicans' approach to that, rather than fight for what they believe in and the preservation of the Constitution, they said, well, let's slip someone in who is nondescript, that really doesn't have a record.
Yes.
How's that worked out?
Yeah, that is you described it well. That's what came to be known as the stealth strategy. One of the worst inventions known to mankind. I mean, what the stealth strategy did was suck all the energy out of your own base, because many of us, when they would nominate these judges that didn't have any record we could find, were like, well, why should we trust that this person's going to be the right thing? I remember when an old good friend of mine, John Sununu, called me over to the White House to tell me that there was this nominee coming from New Hampshire named Souter. And he said to me, Gary, you're going to love this guy. Wait till he gets on the court. He's going to shock the liberals. I said, well, John, how do you know that? And he goes, well, Gary, I can't go into the details, but just say there's been some conversations and you're going to be really happy. Well, Tony, Souter was such a stealth candidate, he didn't even know he was a conservative. And so the rest is history.
And we still don't know it.
Well, you're exactly right.
That really is the essence of why President Trump is so controversial. He's rejected the stealth strategy.
Yes.
In fact, the first president to put out a list of candidates that he would consider for the Supreme Court, saying he would pick pro-life justices. Everyone else has avoided that.
Yeah, when I first heard that, Tony, I thought, wait, was this some sort of April Fool's joke? I mean, it's one thing to put out a list, but to specifically say you want that list, one of the criteria you're going to use is whether or not these possible justices believe that all of our children should be welcomed into the world and protected by the promises of our founding documents, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, have the right to life that is enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. So that was an incredible moment when he first said that. I think it's one of the reasons that many people that care deeply about innocent unborn children who may occasionally disagree with the president about something else or may not like his style, nonetheless understand that this is a key issue that they will vote on.
But a part of that, and this goes to the broader issue of the Trump administration, the dust-up that's always around the president, is because, and you've said this before, because you said this when you were a presidential candidate back in 2000, and let the record state that had Louisiana been the first in the nation, as it was supposed to have been, Gary Bauer would have won because I was your chairman there in Louisiana. But you said, look, most Republicans, when it comes to coming in behind a Democrat, they push the pause button. They never have the courage to do rewind.
Yeah, no, and it's like the prevent defense in football. You know, how many Sundays do we watch our favorite team take a lead and they've been keeping the other team under control, and then all of a sudden we get something that's good, and then we go into a defensive mode and let the other team do whatever they want. That almost always ends in disaster. We've been sort of presiding, or we in the sense of the Republican Party, we've sort of been presiding over a slow motion defeat of all the values that the voters of the Republican Party care about. So whether it's religious liberty or the definition of marriage or the sanctity of life, there's a drip, 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 where every few years or so, we're asked to swallow hard and accept a new reality that issue now has been settled, and we need to fight about these other things. We never seem to have many people over time in the party to get up in the morning and say, what can I do today to put the left back on their heels? Until Donald Trump and Mike Pence came along, and he's been trying to do that every single day of his presidency.
So it's not that he's picking a fight.
No.
He's actually standing up to preserve what has made America historically great, and therein lies the fight. The fight has been brought to him.
Yes. I mean, and look, you spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. You've got a lot of influence up there. For years, I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. I try to get up there too. But I would run into this attitude a lot from some really good people. And you know, quite frankly, if you're not interested in being in a good fight, become a banker or an accountant or something. I mean, those are professions where you can just kind of come in and hide under your desk if you want. But if you're going to get into politics, for crying out loud, you presumably have a vision of what you want America to be. How do we remain a shining city upon a hill? And you certainly don't remain that if you're going to destroy over 1 million innocent unborn children every year.
And because the court has interjected itself in every major issue, that is why the court is so controversial today.
No question about it. The sanctity of life, religious liberty, your right to own a gun to defend your family or to hunt, Those three things, if the left gets complete control of the court and the Congress and the White House, those rights will all be under attack.
All the more reason our voice must be heard in this discussion.
No question.
Gary Bauer, great to be with you. Thanks
Great
so
to
much
be
for
with you.
joining us.
Thanks, Tony.
Folks, let me again encourage you to be a part of letting your voice be heard, and one way to do so is to take the challenge to pray, the challenge to vote, and the challenge to stand.